When a friend called me a loser and stopped communicating with me, then he and his wife tried to evict me from my house. I sued them for everything. It's been 3 years since Mike and I stopped talking. 3 years that felt both longer and shorter than they should have. Back then, I never thought we'd end up like this. We were close for so long, practically brothers. We did everything together: college, weekend trips, late-night conversations about our future. But things change, don't they? Life takes its turns, and sometimes, people you thought would always be there suddenly aren't. Mike was the one who made the decision to cut me out of his life. He didn't mince words either. He flat out told me I was a bad influence. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. That, to him, was a red flag. He said he didn't want me around his family anymore because I didn't understand the responsibility of raising children, and he didn't want me to be around his kids. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. I mean, how could a lack of kids make me a bad friend? But Mike was dead serious. He had his reasons, twisted as they seemed to me. I had no choice but to walk away. I didn't have kids, sure, but it wasn't like that defined me or made me irresponsible. At that time, I decided not to start a family yet. Life had been tough enough for me to just focus on surviving. But Mike was done with me. We hadn't spoken since that day. Until recently. But before we get to that, let's back up a little bit. 3 years ago, when Mike decided I wasn't worth his time anymore, I was going through one of the hardest times of my life. My dad had passed away, and the weight of his death still sat on my chest like a boulder I couldn't shake off. Dad had been my rock growing up, and losing him shattered me. I thought Mike would understand that. After all, I'd stood by him when his mom fell ill and eventually passed away. I remember being there for him, comforting him through the pain, showing up at the hospital when no one else could. I was there for the funeral, there to help him sort through her things, there for every tear and angry outburst as he tried to make sense of it all. We leaned on each other during those hard times, or at least I thought we did. But when it was my turn to need support, Mike wasn't interested. He had his family to worry about. I guess, in his mind, losing a parent wasn't a big enough reason to need help, not when I didn't have kids to worry about. He didn't even come to my dad's funeral. I remember standing there, looking out at the few people who had shown up, wondering where my best friend was. A no-show. I wasn't angry, not at first. More confused than anything. But then weeks turned into months, and the silence between us grew thicker. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Mike had been pulling away long before that final conversation. He'd made his choice, and I was no longer a part of his world. And then, 3 years later, out of nowhere, Mike reached out. It was the strangest thing, getting that message from him. I didn't even recognize the number at first. It just popped up on my phone one evening. I was sitting at home, scrolling through mindless TV shows, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mike. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He needed something. Apparently, they'd had some kind of accident at home, a water heater explosion, or something like that. Their house was damaged, and they needed a place to stay while repairs were being made. I stared at the message, almost not believing it. After 3 years of radio silence, he was suddenly asking for help? I didn't know how to respond at first. It wasn't that I couldn't help him. I had the space. I lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment with plenty of room for guests. But the nerve of him to ask after everything that had happened. He explained they couldn't afford a hotel. They'd been hit hard by medical bills recently, and their budget was stretched thin. He threw in a line about how he'd heard I was the kind of person who helped people in situations like this. It didn't take me long to figure out where that came from. Last year, I had helped out some friends of a friend. Kate, a mutual friend of mine and Mike's, had asked me if I could take in her brother and his wife for a couple of months. They had been in a car accident, a really bad one. Both of them ended up in a coma for weeks. By the time they woke up, their lives had changed drastically. Not just physically, but emotionally too. Their family, especially Kate's mom, had become a problem. She had all these rigid expectations, and when Kate's brother and his wife couldn't live up to them, she kicked them out. Just like that, right after they'd woken up from comas. It was unbelievable, really. They were still trying to get their lives back on track when their own mother turned her back on them. So, I took them in. It wasn't a big deal to me. I had the space, and they needed somewhere to stay. They weren't any trouble at all. What I didn't know at the time was that they'd shared the whole story on Facebook, and apparently, Mike had seen it. I guess in his mind, if I could do that for them, I could do it for him too. He'd always been good at using other people's situations to justify his own. I guess he figured I owed him or something because we'd been friends for so long. But it wasn't the same. Not even close. I stared at my phone for a long time before finally responding. And when I did, it wasn't a friendly reply. I told him no. Plain and simple. I didn't go into details. I didn't need to. He'd made his choice 3 years ago when he decided I wasn't good enough to be a part of his family's life. Now, he was expecting me to open my home to them because they had nowhere else to go? No, thank you. It wasn't even about the space or the inconvenience. It was about the principle of the thing. Helping out Kate's brother and his wife felt right at the time because they genuinely needed it, and they had no one else. But Mike? Mike had turned his back on me when I needed him the most. And now he was asking for favors? I don't think so. So, I sent the message, and that was that. Or at least, I thought it was. But something tells me this isn't over. Knowing Mike, he won't take no for an answer easily. And honestly, I'm not sure what's going to happen next. I guess we'll see. It didn't take long for Mike to come knocking again, though this time, he wasn't as polite about it. A few weeks had passed since his first request, the one about the water heater, and I thought that maybe he'd finally accepted my refusal. I had hoped the message I'd sent made it clear that there was no going back to the friendship we once had, not after everything he'd done. But then, out of nowhere, I received another message. This time, Mike had a new problem. He claimed they were having issues with the electricity in the house, faulty wiring, or something like that. He said they couldn't stay there anymore because it was dangerous for the kids. And once again, he was asking me to take them in. This time, I wasn't as shocked. I mean, after the first request, I could see that Mike was getting desperate. I just didn't know why. The whole thing still felt off to me. But despite my suspicions, I was clear in my response. I wasn't going to take them in. I was childless, and while that hadn't been a big deal to me, Mike had made it a big deal years ago. He'd said I couldn't understand his life, his responsibilities as a father, and how important it was to protect his family from bad influences like me. Well, I turned that logic right back on him. I told him that I didn't want children in my home indefinitely. Not his, not anyone's. I didn't have the space for it emotionally or mentally, especially not after what had gone down between us. Mike didn't take that well. I could feel the anger in his next response, even though it was just a few short texts. He started accusing me of being selfish, throwing out all these reasons why I should help him. He mentioned their medical bills again, how they were drowning in debt, how they couldn't afford a hotel. I could see what he was doing, trying to guilt-trip me into giving him what he wanted. But I wasn't about to fall for it. I'd already been down that road before, helping people out of the goodness of my heart, but this situation was different. Mike had already shown me what kind of person he was, and I wasn't about to open my home to someone who had turned their back on me when I needed them most. Besides, it wasn't just about the principle. There was something more practical to consider. After I turned him down the first time, I started thinking about what would happen if I let Mike and his family stay. A friend of mine had mentioned something about tenants' rights and how, in our state, if someone stays in your home for more than 7 days, they could legally claim residency. I wasn't a legal expert, but the idea of having Mike's family camped out in my home, with the potential to stay indefinitely, gave me serious pause. I didn't know the full details of the law, but I wasn't about to risk finding out the hard way. It wasn't just about helping someone for a few nights. This could turn into a much bigger problem, especially with Mike's track record of taking advantage of situations. So, I stood my ground. I told him no, once again, and made it clear that this wasn't something I was willing to negotiate. Mike, of course, didn't take it well. His next message was full of thinly veiled threats. He told me that if I didn't help him, he would make sure everyone knew about it. He mentioned social media, how easy it would be to post a story about how I'd refused to help a family in need during a difficult time. He made it sound like I'd be some sort of villain in the eyes of our mutual friends and anyone else who saw the post. But what Mike didn't realize was that I wasn't afraid of his threats. Not anymore. Years ago, I might have panicked at the thought of being called out like that in public. I cared too much about what people thought of me back then. But now, I had a clearer perspective on things. And besides, I had a little ace up my sleeve. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone, but I had recently installed security cameras around my apartment. It wasn't just for safety. I'd done it because of some break-ins that had happened in the area. But the cameras had picked up something interesting. My conversations with Mike at the door. They weren't just recording video, but audio as well. I hadn't even thought about it when I was turning him down in person, but when I checked the footage later, there it was, Mike's entitled attitude, his thinly veiled insults, all recorded without him knowing. I had proof of his arrogance and his manipulative tactics, should I ever need it. Still, I wasn't planning on posting anything myself. I wasn't going to stoop to his level. But it was nice to know that if Mike ever did try to drag my name through the mud, I had the receipts to back up my side of the story. And honestly, I doubted many people would be on his side once they saw the truth. Then came the real kicker. After Mike's threats, I started digging a little deeper into his situation. Something about the whole thing had felt off from the beginning, so I asked my sister to help me do some online sleuthing. She's good at that sort of thing, knows how to navigate social media like a pro. It didn't take long for her to uncover the truth. The water heater story? It was a lie. Mike had sold his house 6 months ago. He wasn't dealing with faulty electricity or broken appliances. He didn't even have a home anymore. My sister found the real estate listing, the sale records, everything. Mike had sold the house and was probably couch surfing, looking for a temporary place to land until he figured out his next move. It wasn't an emergency. It wasn't about keeping his family safe. It was about convenience. He didn't want to pay for a hotel, so he figured he could guilt-trip me into giving him free lodging under the guise of friendship. When I found out, I was furious. Not because he had asked for help, but because of how he had lied about it. He tried to manipulate me, all while holding on to that smug sense of superiority from years ago. But now, the truth was out. And once I shared what I'd found with a few close friends, they were just as shocked as I was. We'd all known Mike for years, but none of us had expected him to stoop this low. The more we talked about it, the more obvious it became that something had been off from the very beginning. His insistence on not staying in a hotel, the vague excuses, the sob stories, it all made sense now. My friends rallied around me, offering their support. They agreed that I'd made the right decision in turning him down. It wasn't just about the lie. It was about protecting myself from someone who had clearly shown that he didn't value me as a friend. Mike had burned that bridge long ago, and now he was trying to walk back across it without any remorse for what he'd done. In the end, I wasn't worried about Mike's threats. If he wanted to post about it on social media, he could go ahead. I had nothing to hide. And if it came down to it, I had the evidence to show just how manipulative and deceitful he had been. The people who mattered, the ones who truly knew me, would understand. And as for Mike, well, I wasn't sure what would happen next. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let him take advantage of me again. I found out later that Mike and Shelley had sold their house before they even had a plan in place. They just assumed everything would fall into place as quickly as they'd hoped. I remember hearing through mutual friends how confident they were in the sale, how they bragged about the amount of money they were getting from it, and how excited they were to upgrade to a bigger, more luxurious home. The problem was, the housing market was a lot tougher than they had anticipated. Every house they were interested in was snatched up before they even had a chance to put in an offer, or their offers were outbid by someone with deeper pockets. It was like a game of musical chairs, and every time the music stopped, someone else had grabbed the seat they thought would be theirs. Instead of renting an apartment while they figured things out, Mike and Shelley made the baffling decision to hop from one friend's house to another. They bounced around, staying with anyone who would take them in, convinced that they'd only need to crash for a few days or a week at most. But weeks turned into months, and they were still living out of suitcases, always with the hope that their next offer on a house would be the one that finally stuck. I could see why they didn't want to rent an apartment. In their minds, it was a waste of money. Why throw away cash on rent when they could put it toward buying their dream home? That was the logic they were using. But that logic didn't seem to account for the fact that living out of other people's homes indefinitely was a pretty terrible idea. Renting an apartment might have given them some stability, but Mike and Shelley were too focused on their end goal to see that. They weren't going to settle, as they put it, for something temporary. They wanted a house, and nothing less than that would do. Eventually, After wearing out their welcome at one too many friends' places, they moved into a hotel. I heard all about it from Allison, one of our mutual friends. Apparently, Mike and Shelley weren't happy with the hotel either. They complained that it was noisy, especially with other kids running up and down the hallways. They hated that there was no yard for their children to play in, no space for them to run around. They even griped about the food at the hotel's breakfast buffet, which, according to Shelley, was totally inappropriate for growing kids. I found it ironic, considering they had chosen this life of limbo for themselves. They had sold their house without a backup plan, and now they were struggling to deal with the consequences of their own choices. As if that wasn't bad enough, Shelley started posting about me on Facebook. I didn't even know about it at first until Allison sent me screenshots. It wasn't just one or two posts either. Shelley had written a whole string of passive-aggressive status updates about how certain people refuse to help families in need, throwing in little jabs about my childlessness as if that somehow justified her contempt. The posts were vague enough that she didn't mention my name directly, but anyone who knew us could figure out who she was talking about. The most ridiculous part of it all was when she made up some story about how a mutual acquaintance had tried to steal food from my house because I didn't need it, since I didn't have kids to feed. I couldn't believe the lengths she was going to make me look bad, especially since the whole thing was a complete fabrication. That's when everything started to come together. Between Mike's lies about the water heater and Shelley's bizarre behavior online, I realized they weren't just having temporary issues with their house. They didn't even have a house anymore. The faulty electricity excuse was nothing more than a cover-up for the fact that they had been without a permanent home for months, moving from place to place while they tried and failed to buy a new one. It all made sense now, why Mike was so desperate for me to take them in and why he kept making up excuses to justify it. He didn't want to admit the truth, that he and his family were essentially homeless because of their own poor planning. I was frustrated, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for them. Not because they didn't have a place to live, but because they had created this mess for themselves and then tried to manipulate everyone around them to fix it. They had turned down reasonable solutions, like renting an apartment, in favor of chasing an ideal that was completely out of reach. And when things didn't go their way, they tried to play the victim, as if it was everyone else's fault that they were in this situation. My friends, especially Allison and Laura, along with my sister, were instrumental in helping me piece everything together. We compared notes, shared what we'd heard from mutual acquaintances, and eventually uncovered the full extent of Mike and Shelley's deception. They had been stringing people along for months, using sob stories about broken appliances and medical bills to guilt-trip their way into free lodging. It wasn't an emergency, it wasn't bad luck, it was just poor decision-making on their part, and they didn't want to face the consequences. When I finally confronted Mike with everything we'd found out, I wasn't surprised by his reaction. He tried to downplay it, of course, saying that things hadn't gone as planned and that they were just doing what they could to get by. But I wasn't having it. I made it clear that I wasn't interested in being part of their latest scheme, and I wasn't about to let them use me the way they had used everyone else. It wasn't easy cutting ties with someone who had been such a big part of my life for so long, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Mike had made his choices, and now he was dealing with the fallout. I couldn't help but wonder how different things would have been if he had just been honest from the beginning. If he had come to me and said, "Look, we messed up. We sold the house too soon, and now we're struggling to find a new one," I might have considered helping them, but instead, he had lied, manipulated, and tried to guilt-trip me into giving them a place to stay, all while holding on to the same superiority complex that had driven us apart in the first place. In the end, I didn't feel guilty about turning them down. I knew I had made the right decision, and when I looked at the support I had from my friends, I realized I wasn't alone in that. They had seen through Mike and Shelley's lies too, and they stood by me when I needed them most. Mike and Shelley eventually moved out of the hotel, though I'm not sure where they ended up. We don't talk anymore, and I doubt we ever will. It's strange to think about how close we used to be, and how quickly things fell apart once the truth came out. But I've learned that some people are only in your life for a season, and when that season is over, it's best to let them go. Mike and I had our time as friends, but that time has passed. Now, I'm focused on the people who truly matter, the ones who are honest, supportive, and don't try to take advantage of others. That's the kind of friendship that lasts. After everything came to light, It became clear that Mike's story about the faulty electricity in his house was a complete fabrication. He never had any problems with wiring, nor was there an issue with a broken water heater. It was all just another lie to try and guilt me into letting him and his family move into my place. What really happened was they were still stuck in that hotel, the same one they had been bouncing around in for weeks, complaining about everything from noisy neighbors to the lack of a yard for their kids to run around in. No water heater, no danger, just Mike and Shelley trying to manipulate me with a sob story. It all seemed so absurd once I knew the truth. At first, I couldn't believe he would stoop so low, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Mike had gotten used to taking advantage of people's kindness. It was a pattern with him, and I realized I wasn't the only one he had tried to use. Social media played a big role in exposing his lies. My friends, especially those who had been keeping an eye on Shelley's posts, helped me piece everything together. Shelley had been making these passive-aggressive posts for weeks, talking about how hard things were for their family, how some people just don't offer a hand when you're down, and how it's the ones you least expect who turn their backs on you. The posts were vague enough not to name me outright, but it was pretty clear to anyone paying attention that she was talking about me. It backfired on them, though. People started noticing the inconsistencies in their stories. Friends who had been following the whole situation began asking questions, and once the truth about their housing situation came out, it didn't take long for everyone to realize that Mike and Shelley were playing the victim to cover up their own poor decisions. They were using Facebook as a tool to manipulate people's sympathy, but it only worked until the lies unraveled. What really opened my eyes was hearing from other people who had let Mike's family stay with them. Apparently, I wasn't the only one they had tried to mooch off. After bouncing from place to place following the sale of their house, they had stayed with a few other friends before ending up at the hotel. I hadn't known the full extent of it until some of those people started sharing their experiences with me. It was shocking, honestly. The stories they told were almost worse than what I had imagined. One family said that when Mike and Shelley stayed with them, they left the house an absolute mess. The kids were unruly, running wild all over the place, and Mike and Shelley didn't lift a finger to help. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink, laundry was left strewn across the guest room, and when they finally moved out, the whole place smelled like they hadn't bothered to clean up after themselves the entire time. Another friend said that Shelley made rude comments about their cooking, and the kids constantly demanded attention, whining about not having their usual toys or space to play. It was like they expected to be waited on, as if staying in someone's home meant they didn't have to contribute anything. I was glad I had refused to let them stay with me. Hearing all these horror stories confirmed that I had made the right decision. It wasn't just about protecting myself from being taken advantage of. It was about setting boundaries and not letting them walk all over me like they had done with so many others. My friends saw that too, and their support was invaluable during all of this. They rallied around me, making it clear that I had done nothing wrong by saying no. In fact, they were angry on my behalf. Allison, Laura, and my sister were especially vocal, calling out the whole situation for what it was. An attempt by Mike and Shelley to use and manipulate people who were kind enough to help them. Even Mike's own brother reached out to me, disgusted by his behavior. He couldn't believe that Mike had stooped so low, especially after everything I had done for their family in the past. He remembered how I had stepped up when their mom was sick, how I was there for Mike during some of the toughest times of his life. To see Mike turn around and treat me like this, trying to guilt me into giving him a place to stay under false pretenses, was just too much. His brother made it clear that he didn't condone what Mike was doing and that he appreciated how I had handled the situation. That support meant the world to me, but at the end of the day, I knew I had to deal with Mike directly. It was clear that our friendship was over, but I didn't want to leave things hanging in the air. So, I sent him one final message. It wasn't angry or emotional. It was to the point. I told him that I knew about the lies. I knew he wasn't dealing with any electrical problems, and that he and Shelley were staying in a hotel because they had sold their house months ago without securing a new place to live. I let him know that I wasn't going to allow him to manipulate me anymore, and that his actions were a reflection of his own issues, not some bad influence on my part. I made it clear that his attempts to blame me or make me look bad were not going to work, and that his behavior had done nothing but damage whatever was left of our friendship. It was a measured response, but it felt good to finally put it out there. I was done with him, done with the manipulation, and done with being dragged into his mess. In hindsight, I realized just how much trouble I had avoided by standing my ground. If I had let them move in, even temporarily, it could have turned into a much bigger issue. I'd heard horror stories about people abusing tenants' rights laws, where after staying for a certain number of days, they could claim legal residence and make it incredibly difficult to get them to leave. That's exactly what Mike and Shelley could have done. They could have used the law to their advantage, stayed in my home indefinitely, and it would have taken months, if not longer, to get them out. Not to mention the emotional and financial toll it would have taken on me in the process. Looking back, I'm grateful for the support of my friends. They not only helped me see through Mike's lies, but they also stood by me when I needed them most. They helped expose the truth, showing that I wasn't the bad guy in this situation, no matter how hard Mike and Shelley tried to make me out to be one. In the end, the people who mattered knew the truth, and that was enough for me. Mike and Shelley could continue to play the victim if they wanted, but I wasn't going to be part of their story anymore. They had burned too many bridges, and it was only a matter of time before they ran out of people to manipulate. As for me, I had my real friends, the ones who had my back through thick and thin, and that's all I needed. Things escalated far beyond what I ever imagined. After I sent Mike that final message, I thought it was over. I thought he would realize I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore, and that he would move on. But I was wrong. Instead of backing down, Mike and Shelley decided to take things even further, and what they did next completely blindsided me. It started with more of Shelley's usual passive-aggressive Facebook posts. She'd already been making vague references to me, but now she was outright insulting me in a way that was impossible to ignore. She posted a long rant about how certain people were selfish, greedy, and heartless, how some so-called friends wouldn't even help a family in need because they were too wrapped up in their empty, childless lives. She implied that I was jealous of their family, that I resented them for having children when I didn't, and that I was using their hardships to make myself feel superior. The language she used was harsh, full of venom, and clearly aimed at me. But it didn't stop there. What really pushed me over the edge was when Mike jumped into the fray. He posted his own version of events, spinning the story in a way that made me look like a monster. He said that I had abandoned them when they were at their lowest point, that I had refused to help them out of spite, and that I was laughing behind their backs while they struggled. He painted a picture of me as a vindictive, cruel person who took pleasure in watching others suffer. Worst of all, they both insinuated that I had been spreading lies about their family, making it sound like I was the one who had been manipulating people all along. The posts gained a lot of attention. People started commenting, some in support of them, others in disbelief, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. My name was being dragged through the mud in public, and I couldn't stand it any longer. This wasn't just about personal drama anymore. It was slander, plain and simple, and it was affecting my reputation. That's when I knew I had to take action. With the encouragement of my friends, I decided to sue Mike and Shelley for defamation. I wasn't the kind of person to jump to legal action, but they had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. They had lied, manipulated, and now they were publicly smearing my name in a way that was not only false but damaging to my personal and professional life. It was time for them to face the consequences. I contacted a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Collins. She listened to my story, looked at the evidence I had, screenshots of their posts, the messages, and the testimonies of my friends who had witnessed everything, and she agreed that we had a strong case. We filed the lawsuit for defamation, slander, and emotional distress. The amount we were asking for in damages was substantial, but given the public nature of their attacks and the impact it was having on me, Rebecca assured me that it was more than justified. The trial itself moved quickly. There was so much evidence stacked against Mike and Shelley that their defense didn't stand a chance. In court, Rebecca laid out everything in meticulous detail. She showed the judge the Facebook posts, highlighting the cruel and false statements they had made about me. She called my friends to testify. Allison, Laura, and my sister all spoke about what they had seen and heard, how Mike and Shelley had lied to them, too, and how they had witnessed the manipulation firsthand. They also testified about my character, making it clear that I had always been a supportive friend, even to Mike, until he crossed the line with his deceit. Mike and Shelley tried to defend themselves, but their arguments were weak at best. Shelley sat there with this smug expression, trying to justify her posts by claiming they were just venting and that I had overreacted. Mike, on the other hand, tried to play the victim, saying that they were under stress and that they hadn't meant for things to get so out of hand. But none of it held up. The judge wasn't buying any of their excuses, especially not after hearing the testimonies and seeing the mountain of evidence against them. At one point during the trial, Rebecca played a crucial piece of evidence, the footage from my security cameras. I hadn't even realized how valuable it would be until Rebecca brought it up. The cameras had recorded my interactions with Mike when he came to my house asking for help. The audio captured his manipulative tone, his thinly veiled insults, and his arrogant assumptions that I would just let him and his family move in without question. That footage was the final nail in the coffin. It showed the judge exactly who Mike was, someone who thought he could bully and guilt people into giving him what he wanted. The trial wrapped up faster than I expected. The judge ruled in my favor, finding Mike and Shelley guilty of defamation, slander, and emotional distress. He ordered them to pay me a significant amount in damages, $250,000. It was more than I had anticipated, but given the extent of their lies and the impact it had on my life, it felt like justice. It turned out that they hadn't even finished paying off their medical bills, but they had the money to pay, although it cleaned out most of their savings. Apparently, they had been sitting on a decent amount of cash from the sale of their previous house, and while they had been bouncing between friends and hotels, they hadn't dipped into that money as much as I'd thought. It turned out that they were holding on to it for their future dream home, refusing to rent or make any other long-term financial commitments. Once the court ordered them to pay the damages, that dream came crashing down. They had to use the bulk of what they had saved to settle with me, leaving them with barely anything left. It was a complete reversal of fortune. The people who had been so arrogant, so sure that they could manipulate their way through life, were now left almost penniless. Mike and Shelley had to pack up and leave town. The last I heard, they moved to Jackson, Mississippi, one of the poorest cities in the poorest state in the country. No one had heard from them since. It was as if they had disappeared from everyone's lives, no longer able to manipulate and lie their way into other people's homes. Part of me felt a strange mix of relief and sadness, not for them, but for the friendship we had once had, before it all went so horribly wrong. But the truth is, Mike and Shelley did this to themselves. They made choices, and those choices had consequences. I wasn't the bad guy they tried to make me out to be. I was just someone who stood up for myself when they tried to take advantage of my kindness. And in the end, the court saw that, my friends saw that, and I saw that. That was all the vindication I needed. In the months that followed the trial, life slowly returned to normal. The stress of it all began to fade, and I found peace in knowing that I had done the right thing. My friends remained by my side, stronger than ever, and my reputation was restored. As for Mike and Shelley, well, they were gone, leaving behind a trail of burned bridges and broken relationships. The fallout from their lies and manipulation was complete. They had tried to twist the narrative, to make me look like the villain in their story, but in the end, the truth came out. And with that truth came justice. If you like the story, don't hesitate to subscribe and listen to new stories every day. Write in the comments what you like the most.